Hey everybody, Jane here, and we are going to do a series wrap up for the Jaine Austen Mystery Series. I just finished the last book, and I want to talk about the series as a whole.
Pictures and patterns put into words that stream across the page, capturing life as soft spoken.
Okay, so I have been reading this series over the course of probably the last 4 or 5 years, maybe even longer. I picked up the first book I picked up had to do with the tiara. I'll post it up here if I can figure out which one it was. But it was the first one I read and I was immediately hooked. So our main character throughout the series is Jaine Austen. She is a freelance writer. This book is told in her POV and she is just hilarious. Now these books are often zany and over the top. Not only do we have Jaine as the main character, but we also have excerpts from her parents who email her to tell the crazy zany things that they get up to. Her mother is a chocoholic who has very specific ideas about how people should act, and her dad is a ridiculous kind of caricature of a, kind of man child. So, he's the kind who is also like always causing problems. I believe it's their homeowners association. He and the lady who runs the homeowners association hate each other and they're always in competition. So like in this book, I believe she found out she was related to Betsy Ross, and he dug and found out evidence that ended up not being correct, that he was related to Elvis. And so like he felt flaunting her Betsy Ross connection, and he decided to flaunt his Elvis connection, and it's very zany and over the top. We also have Jaine with a cat who is just the sassiest little cat ever. A sassy, misbehaving cat with lots of personality. Her name is Prozac. And in this book, she plays quite a big role as she goes with Jaine on this trip to help write this guy's book. She's a freelance writer, and in most of the books, the mystery starts out with her getting some kind of writing gig and going off to work on this writing gig, and somebody gets murdered. So she is very bad luck as a writer, but it's still usually a funny and hilarious time as we go along. We also have Jaine's best friend, Lance, and he is kind of awful, but often funny. He gives Jaine a lot of issues about her weight and eating habits. We are never told throughout the series, like, if Jaine is really plus size. We're kind of given the impression that she is, but it's never, like, really, really clear that she is plus size. But as far as like general interpretation, I feel like we could assume she is plus size and like late 30s, early 40s. She is divorced, no children, and I generally had assumed she'd always just a little bit older than myself, although now I'm 40 and like looking back on these, especially after the last book, I'm not necessarily sure she's quite 40, but she was probably is meant to probably be in her mid-30s. I don't know if she ever tells in the books, but I've always pictured her as kind of that. She is very food-driven, which I like, although I am kind of glad that this series is over now that I've just had bariatric surgery, because I don't know how I'll feel about relating to these books once I'm healed and once I get my mental health from being an overeater handled and everything else. But as an overweight person, I found her very, very relatable. I do want to mention that there is some toxicity in this about weight-related things. I had recommended this to a friend who is actually underweight and has in the past maybe struggled a little bit with, eating enough. And she found some of these comments in the book about thinness triggering, because Jaine is definitely the kind of girl who's like, that girl needs to eat a donut. and also her own food issues are interesting. Jaine does often try to lose weight and often to no avail. I know there is one book where Jaine goes to fat camp and that didn't end up going well. And just overall, I found her a very relatable person as a plus size person, but your mileage may vary. She makes fun of herself, but not in a way that I found degrading of people who are heavy. I don't know if the jokes will be acceptable to people who are too thin or have eating disorders of any kind. So please consider that before picking up the series if that is something that might be triggering to you. The mysteries themselves range from very good to awful, with a lot of them being fairly meh. Sometimes I could figure out who the killer was. Sometimes there is not enough evidence for who the killer is. And sometimes the killer is the person with the stupidest possible motive. I had made a TikTok video at one point, kind of making fun of the resolution of one of the latter books that I'd read, because the person who did it was so ridiculous. Like, they had the worst motive. Everybody else had a really good motive for being the murderer, and like way more motive than they should have had, considering it was supposed to be people who didn't really know each other. But they all had motive, and this guy had a motive, but his motive was like down here. It was the dumbest motive ever. And I was like, really? All the people that could have killed this girl kill, and it's this guy.
Oh, I bet that's the murderer. She killed her sister. Yeah, I'd murder somebody if they killed my sister too. I bet she did it. I'm pretty sure. Oh, she was his childhood bully. Maybe he killed her. I mean, I like him, but I wouldn't blame him if he killed her. She's known him forever. Well, she's blackmailing him, and it could ruin his marriage. So maybe I don't like them as well. I think it should definitely be the bully or the one who she murdered her sister. Are you kidding me? The murderer murdered her because of a toupee. A toupee.
Anyway, I don't think these are great mysteries. I think these are great comedies with a little bit of a mystery element that I enjoy. I do love mysteries. I have a good time with these, but they're so over the top. They're so crazy. They're so zany. I think if you read one and love Jaine's voice and love who Jaine is as a character and can appreciate the humor even though it's over the top, you might really enjoy this series. If you read one and you're like, oh, this isn't hitting, none of these books will probably hit for you because they are just a lot of the same. The mysteries are generally, like I said, meh. So I wouldn't necessarily be like, yes, these are great mysteries, pick them up for the mystery. But I think they have a very fun voice and a lot of comedic time to it. I always enjoy these. They're fast, fun reads. I use them as palate cleansers. And overall, I would say this series is probably a 4 for me. I have read every single book in the series. I don't necessarily have a favorite that I think of off the top of my head. A lot of them don't stick with me very long, other than I enjoy this series and this world. I would read more if the author put out more short stories, and I would have continued the series if she'd continued putting out books. I follow her on Facebook, so I mean, this is an author I really, really, truly enjoy. This isn't a series where I've decided to own all the books. This isn't a series where I necessarily recommend it to everybody I know, but I have a good time, and I think if you are looking for just something that's fun and zany, if you're maybe a little bit overweight, plus size, and don't have issues with the food content in this series is just such a fun, good time. All right, guys, have you read the Jaine Austen Mystery Series? Have you read all of it or just a few books? If you have a favorite book, post that in the comments. Also, if you've gotten to this point in the video, please put a kitty cat emoji for Prozac, who we love. And I'm sad that we're not going to get to see her continued adventures. But I do think that the author said she was retiring because of her age, And she's in her 80s, so I think that is a fair and appropriate thing to do. And I'm glad we had closure. I'm glad it's not a series that, we just lost the author to and didn't ever get to finish. So I'm glad the author made the decision, especially in her 80s, to say, okay, it's time to end this book as a full length. She did say she might still do some like short novellas and stuff like that. And I think that would be great and fun to see. And I would absolutely pick up anything more in this world that the author wrote. So yeah, I've enjoyed this series, and I hope if you have the opportunity to enjoy it, that you also enjoy it as much as I have. Thanks, guys. See you next time.